Hello and welcome to this, I don't know, special episode of Rotten Reviews, I guess. If you're looking for anything related to horror content, this is not the episode for you. This is just more of a casual chat about something that happened, something that's been on my mind, and time to clear the air just a little bit. So, on April 25th, I posted a community post on YouTube, and in that I said, I have deactivated my Twitter account. All social media focus will be either here or through the Patreon Discord indefinitely. Indefinitely meaning like the true sense of the word, and that, it's not necessarily forever. It's just without definition. I don't want to have any kind of date associated with it. Things change. Um, and the responses that I got to that were honestly pretty funny, but also a bit concerning. And I kind of wanted to address them and talk about why I did this, because there's been some assumptions made about me, some correct and some very incorrect. And I figure, you know what, it's time to actually just do something that I really try not to do on the channel very often, and get a bit political. So this is kind of a way to just clear the air, get stuff out there, and then be able to focus back on the horror content. And this is honestly a lot of things that have been on my mind anyway, so this is just as much for me as anybody else. But some of the responses that I got to this, one of which is, thank you for your virtue signal. I just found you and now realize your channel won't be worth my time if these are your announcements. All I said is I've deactivated my Twitter account. It was really kind of from my perspective, my attempt to have a level of business courtesy for my clients, if you will. I know that this is kind of a hobby sort of thing, but I mean, I do have a sole proprietorship. I have the business name registered, Rotted Entertainment Group. This is something that I have been treating. I declare all my taxes. I do treat this as a business because I'm trying to grow it as a business, an entertainment business that some people would kind of think of as frivolous, but I don't. So if a communication method gets cut off, and the folks that were able to contact me in one particular manner can no longer do that, here's the alternate methods of communication. Just a heads up, this is closed, these are open, done deal. I didn't give any explanation for it until this video, but it was still assumed, and with the moniker of virtue signaling, which I thought was pretty funny, as well as the exodus from the channel. If you are the kind of person that watched my review of Amityville Vibrator and thought, this is the guy that I want to subscribe to, and if you are, then thank you, that's great. But if me making a comment post that is deviating from 99.9% of my content, which is about horror movies, the kind of thing that you subscribed to, and all I said was I've deactivated my Twitter account, and that's enough to get you running for the hills, Matt, that's a special level of fragility, but wow. And, there has been other ones. This one was particularly fun here. Why would you delete your Twitter account? Because a billionaire bought it? Because it blocked the story about Hunter Biden that turned out to be true? Why does that upset you? Kind of weird. There's a lot to unpack there. And I'm just not even going... It's funny. One of the reasons that I deleted my Twitter account is because the expected response that a lot of folks had when Elon Musk put his sincere offer on the table, and by all accounts, it looks like Twitter is going to be accepting it. It's still a bit nebulous. It's still a bit gray area, but it was enough to cause me some concern. There's been this expectation ever since then that liberals are going out of their minds. It's like, No, I've had concerns about Twitter as a platform and about Elon Musk for a very long time. And this is a decision that has been a long time coming. This is not something that I was very happy with Twitter. And, it was just, dancing through the meadow until this moment. And then I got super angry and was furious about Hunter Biden and, peaced out. That's not the case. So why did I leave Twitter? What are my reasonings for that? Well, first of all, my Twitter account was primarily my business account. I had a personal alt, but I never used it. So it was mostly just my Routed Reviews Twitter account. And that, largely started as a way to grow my business as kind of a marketing thing and a method of communicating on a channel level with viewers and other creators and so forth. And from a communication standpoint, that worked okay. But as far as actual traffic being brought to the channel, it was remarkably slim. I think at last count, the analytics said that it was 0.14% of my traffic. Even though I posted darn near every single video I ever made, I posted on Twitter. It was it was a drop in the bucket, and I wasn't really seeing a whole lot of returns on that. There was the people that followed me also subscribed to me, so they're already looking at me through the browse features and through the pop-ups if they click the bell, which that'd be great if you did. So it wasn't a political thing. It was more of a business thing. I wasn't seeing a whole lot of return of investment as far as marketing, which was the original intention of it. And then from a personal level, I was espousing, the BS that's, pops, stupid things that pop into my head. I wonder how many times Jesus farted in his life, things like that. Which I still question. And, it was a fun way to kind of have silly, non sequiturs, that follow me day to day and just kind of, so on. But at the same time, it also was a bit of a time dump. And so just on a personal level, I wanted to take a little bit of a break from that. And now that I have deactivated my Twitter account and stepping back, I can see how much of a time dump that it was. My productivity in so many facets of my life has increased. So, looking at it now, that indefinite thing, and I know that I have a window of time that I could reactivate it and, not lose any content. I'm just not inclined to do it. Now that I have stepped back, I'm glad that I did. I'm focusing more on, reading. I'm more on, video creation, on interacting with other folks. There had been some methods of communication that have been personally enriching for me. Some Discord channels of some Patreons that I follow, and I wasn't keeping up with a lot of them. And now I'm doing that more, which has been so much better for my psychological and my emotional state. Just so many kind folks in there. Differing opinions about a lot of things, but always with an air of respect. And you can't really make that claim as far as Facebook, Twitter, that kind of thing. So to be able to have more of an intimate relationship with the people that I talk to on social media has been really enriching. So, no, I'm not terribly upset about Hunter Biden's laptop thing. I don't consider it to be virtue signaling to simply make a business announcement for the sake of my subscribers that one door closed and these doors here are open. And let's just go ahead and get into it. So, this is an opportunity for me to, like I said, clear the air and be political and talk about the areas of beyond just my personal experiences with Twitter that caused me concern to pull this trigger, because I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that the Elon Musk thing had nothing to do with my decision. Of course it did. I mean, it wasn't a coincidence of the timing, but it wasn't, like I said, the entirety of the decision. It was this last straw that broke the camel's back more than anything else. But yeah, if people want to assume about my politics, which I think is a really dangerous thing, and that's something that I saw on Twitter a lot. So here we go. This is kind of the grander view of where I was coming from. Is words have meaning. And that becomes the real crux of the issue. If you want to know about who I am and what my politics are, which, again, I largely try to keep off the channel, but hey, here we are. Let's rip off the Band-Aid. I'm a 41-year-old man, cis white male, bisexual, that lives in rural New York State. And I mean, really rural. The village that I live in is like a population of less than 1,000. I grew up in San Diego, California for most of my life, the first 26 some odd years of my life before moving to, a rural area. And so I've experienced very dense populations of, mixed dense populations of individuals, in kind of a city setting, an urban setting, as well as, the last 15, 16 years now of more, fairly predominantly like 99.9% white rural area. So I've had a lot of different experiences with different aspects and demographic snapshots of America. And my basic politics, I've leaned somewhat liberal. It's one of those things where, Elon Musk himself has done the whole gauge thing of, trying to, like the centrist BS. I believe, Black Lives Matter, trans rights are human rights. Healthcare should be available for all as a right, not a privilege. I acknowledge that I do have white privilege, cis privilege. That makes me woke to a lot of people, which in my opinion, from everything that I've seen, and I've never had anybody been able to present me with a valid counter argument that woke is nothing more than respectful to all. So I really don't see, if somebody wants to, brand my forehead with woke, I'll happily receive that. I believe in capitalism, but not late stage capitalism. We're going to get to that. I am a strong proponent of equity leading to equality, with equality definitely being the goal of our nation. I believe in states' rights, but I also do believe in the necessity for federal programs and federal regulations. I believe that reproductive rights should be protected. Abortion should be available for everybody. And that we should be very, very, very careful about what we find morally reprehensible as individuals and what we are willing to cross the line into legislating out to others. And that's really the whole point to the abortion thing as far as I'm concerned. I don't like abortion, which means I'm personally not going to get one. I know that sounds silly, and it is silly, and that's also why I believe that men should not be at the table making the decisions on reproductive rights. So, that kind of leads into another philosophy of mine, is that we need to be a lot less, I have a mouth and I have ears, and I really try and be very careful about which one is closed and which one is open at any given point. And largely, I feel that mouth closed, ears open should be the default standard, but it doesn't seem to be that way. And that also leads me to words matter. So, that's a snapshot of who I am broken down into other things. And, if that caused you to leave the video, I don't know what to tell you. I think that respectful discourse amongst folks that disagree is where we kind of come together. So, that's unfortunate. But for those of you that are still watching and still sticking around, I want to kind of espouse dig into the whole words matter thing quite a bit, because that has a lot to do with my decision and my feelings on the Elon Musk situation. So we've had this this very troubling to me trend happening over the last 20 some odd years of the loudest and the most obnoxious voices in the room are the ones that get the most ink, the most attention, the most water cooler talk, and are on the radar of the most people. And I mean, it could be argued it goes back a lot longer than 20 years, but for the most part, as I recall growing up, there always kind of was a balance of brashness met with decorum, and the politicians that spoke frankly still were reserved. And I mean, to a large degree, they spoke frankly so that they could have the, I'd love to have them, this president for, a hot dog and a beer in my backyard barbecue kind of, thing. And, that, for good or ill. But there's always been a reserved tone, and that largely comes from the standpoint of the fringe. So if somebody was going to be speaking without a filter, and talking about, and making allusions to, and yes, I'm talking about Trump, and talking about, making two separate sentences crammed together at the same time, that was very stochastic terrorism, inclined. Will nobody, rid me of this meddlesome priest? But I mean, if you're making an argument of, the press is on me and, so on and so forth, well, at least we have the Second Amendment. All right. Now we have a situation where somebody has, crossed that line. Decorum is out the window. There's a level of plausible deniability in which, people that want to defend that can say, oh, he didn't say anything. But here's the thing is 99% of the, 99.999% of the people that are going to be listening to that on YouTube, or, we're actually at the rally or whatever, are going to be, whatever, either support it or decry it, but they're not going to, they're not going to treat it seriously. So where does it really come in? With the fringe, with the folks that are going, those 0. Whatever percent that are going to hear that and say, yes, sir. I'm picking up your words. Yes, sir. And that's a remarkably dangerous road to go down. Words have meaning. And, we can't always account for, every fringe element. There's going to be people that are going to be hearing messages of, calls to violence brewing in their coffee pot, which, leads, definitely one of the things as far as, access to healthcare should be a right for all Americans, mental health being a certain, portion or very significant portion of that. But, when those kind of calls go out publicly, it becomes a responsibility. When words have meaning, that means that the voices that carry the loudest need to be the most reserved. I have a channel of, 3,500 some odd subscribers, which is, I'm grateful for each and every one of you. But I'm not a big voice. I don't boom across the internet. I am a little pipsqueak with my own little horror YouTube channel. I don't carry very far, but 3,500 people is not lost on me. That's, even 100 people, if, subscriber versus, active viewer count and engagement and so forth, let's just say 100 people watch this video. That's not lost on me. And I'm very reserved with my words, considering that I'm not just having a private conversation with a good friend that I trust at, across the lunch counter. I'm talking to the world. And this may be 100 people, which is a lot, in my opinion, as far as, my voice carrying across the world. 100 people, some in Glasgow, some in Melbourne. That's significant. But it also has the potential, I seriously doubt it, and I honestly hope that it doesn't, but this has the potential of reaching millions if it winds up blowing up, which, again, I doubt and I hope it doesn't. So I'm careful with my words. I don't really make calls to action. I don't put, two sentences together that seem benign and with plausible deniability, but, wink, wink, nudge, nudge for anybody out there that might have, chip on their shoulder and access to an arsenal. Or not even going that far. But I mean, the fact that, and I'm not attributing this, solely on Trump's shoulders. I don't want to, make that claim, but there have been as there have been increasing calls to violence, there has been increasing violence. Mass shootings are up. Like, they're happening every day. What once was, a tragedy that, took over all the news channels because it happened once a generation or once started to turn into once a year, then started to turn into once a month. And then now it's just every day. And I don't have a solution for that, except that, we need to turn the burner down. Words matter. The voices that speak the loudest, that carry the farthest, need to be the most reserved. The ability to speak to everybody out there is a great and terrible responsibility, and it needs to be treated as a responsibility. And Twitter has been a major problem for that. And I'm not saying that, I don't believe in the First Amendment and we should shut down voices and so on and so forth. I'm just saying that we need to have more civility. We need to have more responsibility with our words. And we need to stop putting such a megaphone on the ones that don't take that responsibility. Yes, they're brash. Yes, they're loud. Yes, they follow I can't believe he or she said that. That doesn't mean that it needs press. It doesn't mean that it needs ink, but that's the very inherent nature of Twitter, is that the people that are speaking the most obnoxious stuff are getting platformed the most. And then that gets retweeted and that gets quote tweeted. And, then you have the person that is kind of, 40 years, lawyer, small statesman, community leader, that's making, fairly calm and rational discussions, and they're getting 50 retweets and a couple hundred likes. So then it kind of turns into a situation where, well, if we want to get trending, then we need to lean on this aspect of things, and that becomes inherently dangerous. And the fact that Twitter is so ingrained in politics is a concern, left and right. I don't care. And I'm not a centrist. I think that centrism is a costume to hide behind. I really do. I mean, I used to call myself a centrist, and I think that back when I did, it was a bit more valid, but things have gotten very out of hand. And centrism, I think, is a way to simply have your views but not be judged by them, necessarily. It's a mask. No, I lean left, but I also I see the situation happening with Twitter, and now I'm also seeing, and not just now, but over the last 10 years, more and more there's the symbiotic, unbreakable nature of the relationship between Twitter and politics. And that's very disconcerting to me. We've had actual governance happening over Twitter. We've had executive orders and military strategies announced to the world on Twitter. And if that doesn't scare the shit out of you, I don't know what to say. It scares the shit out of me. So, the fact that we have had politicians, left and right, actually providing governance through a private company is extremely concerning. In my mind, we really should have I don't want to just come up with what ifs and if I were in charge, I would do this, and that kind of speaks to the mouth closed, ears open thing, and the reversal of that. But I really do strongly believe that we should have had a long time ago, and if the best time was yesterday, and the second best time is now. But I really do think that we should have a government-run, independent, bipartisan government-run entity, somewhat like the USPS. Get into that one, but as independent as possible, bipartisan commission for the operation of digital mass communication of publicly elected figures on a federal and state level. Basically, government Twitter. That if politicians need to abandon the private platform, they need to ditch their Twitter accounts, they need to abandon ship, and we need to provide them with a secure, history logging, take into account with not necessarily regulations, but our own practical terms of service on a government platform. We need to make the standard of politicians speaking on the stairs of the Capitol building, speaking on the lawn of the White House. We need to have the separation between public levels of political communication and private companies. We need to have them completely severed. Because now we have a situation where Elon Musk is potentially, going to be buying this. And he does have political interests. What they may be, whether he leans left or whether he leans right, whatever you want to kind of interpret as far as what his leanings are, I think are kind of irrelevant. The fact is he has political interests. He runs companies that rely on government subsidies. He treats the SEC as an hindrance, and very publicly, vocally so. There's a lot in play as far as his relationship as a business owner and as a billionaire, and the government and laws and regulations that surround him. So the fact that we have a platform in which governance is happening, and it could wind up being owned by somebody that has a stake in that has been very flippant and vocal, and I believe, in my personal opinion, has not treated his words responsibly, has not acknowledged that the further your voice carries, the more responsibility you inherit with that, and simply speaks off the cuff, controls money markets with a singular tweet to make them rise and fall, and doesn't seem to really treat that with the level of care that deserves. If my tweets caused money markets, crypto markets, Wall Street, anything like that, caused any level of reaction, rising or falling, doesn't matter, I would probably be paralyzed to the point of never being able to send another tweet again in my life. But for him, it seems to be just kind of, speaking about whatever's bothering him while he's sitting on the shitter. I mean, I honestly think that it was very problematic for politicians to be using Twitter as a platform, being that it be a private company. But at the very least, there was kind of at least, a board that, something by committee. But, really, I can't imagine Elon Musk not going in there and simply being one man behind the steering wheel. And that's concerning. I honestly think that it's very concerning, our relationship with billionaires in this country as it is. I mentioned that I very strongly support capitalism, but not late stage capitalism. And I stand by that. I'm a business owner. I have a sole proprietorship. I have 2 sole proprietorships. This is one of them. I very strongly believe in capitalism. I believe in the free market. I am a strong proponent of that. People are going to be watching this and calling me a communist, and that's just the furthest thing from the truth. I think that we need to be very careful with the labels and the vocabulary we throw it out. Learn your definitions as far as that goes. I've read Thomas More's Utopia. It's a good idea in theory. I don't think it really matches with human nature. So yeah, I dig capitalism. It's good stuff. But late-stage capitalism is extraordinarily concerning for me, and I think is honestly one of the biggest sources of our ills as a nation. I think that billionaires simply cannot exist without exploitation of millions of people. I think that billionaires should not exist. I am all for millionaires, but given that money is finite and at some point it becomes a situation of hoarding wealth to the point of the detriment of the people below, that the concept of billionaires is problematic within the confines of our finite money system in the United States and in the world. The fact that he's a billionaire through inherited wealth from apartheid and emerald mines and so forth is extraordinarily problematic. Especially when we have situations, social situations in the United States that have been, very difficult as far as inherited wealth through generations of, let's just say, civil downtroddenness. That's getting into a whole different topic. But yeah, I think that, with somebody that professes to be a self-made billionaire, but really inherited a fortune, and companies that he has bought into exist thanks to a large amount of government subsidies. And now he wants to buy a platform in which governance is happening. Politicians are a part of it. And he controls those companies that are regulated and so on by the politicians that are on the platform. And nobody seems to really kind of acknowledge either he nor the politicians that may control lobbying, control the SEC, control Citizens United, things like that. Nobody seems to, draw this parallel between that and, problematic institutions blending together. We have very much, fox guarding the hen house situation with this, and it completely destroys the possibility of any kind of checks or balances, and we wind up with private and public bleed through that's extraordinarily concerning. However you feel about Elon Musk as a personal individual, whether he's your crypto savior or, whatever, I still don't understand how people can be okay with somebody that has companies with vested interests in government outcomes buying a platform in which government people have voices heard. To me, that's just asking for trouble, and it's furthering our dissent. I've seen this issue brewing under the surface for 10, 20 years now of people being less and less responsible with their words and having them simultaneously carry farther and farther. And again, it's not the most reasonable person that gets the most retweets, likes, and press. It's the most obnoxious. And no matter, it's what's allowed folks like MTG and, so forth to carry as far as they have. There desperately needs to be Paul Anka playing the piano saying, just don't look. But that doesn't really go with human nature. We are the ones that want to crane our necks as we pass by the accidents on the road. So we give more spotlight, more attention, more press, more ink, more retweets, more talk, more water cooler conversations, more can you believe he said that, more shares to the people that are the most obnoxious. And all these things combined, plus the fact that it really wasn't contributing to my business and it was a personal time dump, there we go. I happily clicked deactivate on my Twitter. I think that we do need, I mentioned a couple times now that I dig capitalism, but not late stage capitalism. I honestly think that capitalism, unregulated and unfettered, is extremely dangerous. We need regulation. We need government imposed guidelines, because I think that there is no getting around that if companies were able to pay less and less and less, that they absolutely would. Companies do not operate on a moral level. If they could, hire, 5-year-olds to grease their wheels for, 10 cents an hour, they would. If they could get away with things, they will. They will exploit. You're going to have some companies that are going to operate on a very morally, strong level as a personal, as a business principle. And that's fantastic, but we can't count on that happening. And so we do need government regulation. We do need guidelines and yes, barriers put in place for free market to thrive. Because we can't thrive if we are starving. And we're getting to that point more and more. I'm on a roll at this point. So here, we have been existing more and more with less and less. And this is another thing that I've been seeing over the course of the 40 years I've been alive. When I first, when I was born, my dad was the only person working on our house. He had a fairly blue-collar job working in aerospace. General Dynamics in San Diego turned into Martin Marietta, then Lockheed Martin, kind of, traded back and forth in the 90s with the whole recession and pink slips flying everywhere. But prior to that, in the 80s, it was good times. General Dynamics, union job, cushy pay. He was able to afford house, car, all sorts of stuff. And he only had high school education, but he got the job at General Dynamics, and like I said, blue collar. Somebody could exist on a full-time blue collar job and thrive as a family, not just living wage, but thriving wage. And over the course of the 40 years I've been alive, one step after another, we've been asked to live on less and less. We've been trimmed down. Wages have stayed stagnant while inflation has risen. And inflation needs to rise. That's one of the, it needs to rise at a fairly steady rate. If we wind up with deflation, if we wind up with things costing less over time, then that's going to stall things out, because why would you buy a couch at $600 if you know that next year it's only going to cost $500? And then that causes people to simply not buy things. And that's a simplified version of it, but it extends out to futures markets and other things. It stalls out an economy if there's not inflation, if there's not some level of growth. It just needs to be slow. We can't have things rise exponentially while wages stay stagnant. It needs to have a small progression of growth in order for a capitalist economy to succeed. And wages and benefits and programs that are available to people, opportunities, collectively opportunities, need to rise with that. And it hasn't. And we've had a situation where over the years, wages have stayed stagnant. Prices of goods and services have gone up. We have not been able to meet that, and there's no real good reason for that beyond late-stage capitalism, corporate greed. There's no reason billionaires should exist, and if they do, it's only at the expense of everybody under them. So we've had, it would be one thing if companies were saying, we can't afford to pay higher wages because, our prices are going up too. Cost of goods are going up all across the board, including for us, our manufacturing, our burger patties, whatever we deal with as a company, it's going up for us too. We're hurting too. Well, that would make sense. And there would be a certain level of logic in that. It seems like it's still kind of a problem that needs a solution instead of just simply saying it is what it is. But it would at least be understandable, except that corporate profits are skyrocketing. Every quarter, they're higher and higher than they were the same quarter the previous year. So they're not suffering. They could hire more people. If corporations were happy with, also following that slow growth as opposed to capitalizing on things, we would be in a much better place. We would have the wage increases. We would have our opportunities following along the same slow growth as inflation, and things would be more proper. But that's simply not been the case. We've had more and more billionaires over the decades, and it's difficult for me to not see the correlation between more corporate profits, more billionaires, and also less and less for us to live on. It's costing us more and more for the goods that are smaller and smaller, and it feels like we have been kept on an experiment. And the grander experiment is, how little can people live on, the average person live on? Yeah, I guess, period. How little can the average person live on? And can it be less? Can we keep them on the razor's edge? And then if somebody's walking on the razor's edge, how much does it take to really tip them one way or the other? Have them fall off the razor's edge, which a situation like a pandemic could certainly do. I don't think that it needed to be as economically detrimental as it was. It's just that we were kept on the razor's edge prior to that point, hoping that nothing would really tip us. Something did. And we need to be in more of a position where we're not walking on the razor's edge. We're walking on a really solid, wide beam, so that if something does, a strong wind does hit us, we're not going to fall off. We need to be in a place of not just living wage, but thriving wage. And it's also bears repeating that as we find out more about this experiment of how little can the average person live on, how little can the average person exist, we're talking about the average person, which means if we are making the average person walk the razor's edge, living paycheck to paycheck, having to struggle and having to start GoFundMes every time the engine throws a rod, what about the people that are below average? It's worth talking about, because people are starving and people are dying, and more people are angry. Houses in the East Coast, especially the colonial such, they're aging out. They're getting to be 100+ years old, and not everybody can afford maintenance, upkeep, turning their plaster and lath into sheetrock, upgrading their lead pipes and their so forth. They're paying higher utility bills because their windows aren't optimized, but they can't afford to replace their windows. And that's for the people that have the absolute privilege of home ownership, which so many of us don't. There are families that are starving. And it shouldn't be that way. It doesn't need to be that way. And if it's existing that way while we're getting more and more billionaires hoarding wealth, and more corporate profits as they downsize their products and charge more for them, then those are problems that need to be addressed seriously. And we're not addressing anything right now because we're stalled out. And why are we stalled out? That's largely because we have rhetoric. We have people that are talking about, wanting to put focus on, border crises that don't exist. So they're stopping trucks for inspections that aren't necessary and causing day-long, backlogs, spoiling food. We have people that are fabricating problems instead of solving them. They're coming up with, trans kids playing sports. We need to address this now. How about the families that are starving? How about this family over here that's, sitting in the cold, or this person here that spent their entire life coming up with their savings and doing well and not taking on a whole lot of credit or debt, and get it completely wiped out because their wife got breast cancer. We have major problems in this country. You don't need to be inventing more, but it's the inventing more that gets the most tweets. It's the strongest, it's the loudest, it's the brashest. Meanwhile, we also have situations where the real problems are not getting addressed, the fake problems are getting the most press, and the people that are speaking the loudest and the brashest and the most obnoxious and with the least amount of personal responsibility attached to their words, we're also getting that 0.01% of folks that are listening to these calls for violence, listening to who's the enemy, who's the groomer, who's the pedophile, and saying, I hear you, loud and clear. Violence is ramping up. Mass shootings are ramping up. We have people that are operating on less and less and are angrier and angrier, and they're not getting addressed. Governance should not be happening on a platform that operates privately. Because once it does, then it becomes very easy for a billionaire to buy it out. And in my mind, that's extremely alarming. Whether or not he actually does, the fact that he got this close was very disconcerting and very alarming. So that's why I deleted Twitter. That's why I deactivated my account. I know this video ran long. I apologize for that. I know it was political. I don't really apologize for that. I don't do this very often. I don't really think I've ever gone to this extent before, ever. And it's not going to be a habit. I really just needed to blow off some steam here and just address this. And I promise that I am going to get back to 99%, or actually much greater than that, horror movie reviews. Apolitical, benign. If you liked my review of Amityville Vibrator, you're going to like what's coming tomorrow. So, but thank you for this opportunity. And if you've stuck with me this long, both in the channel and in this video, I really do appreciate it. I know that we're not always going to agree, but at the very least, hopefully we can disagree respectfully. So there we go. I'm going to go ahead and sign off on this video. Thank you so much for joining me. And please just take care of each other. Talk to you soon.